we begin this morning with the Democratic National Convention set to get underway in Chicago. Vice President Kamala Harris will officially accept her party's nomination for the presidency of the United States. Vice President Harris is already in the Windy City, and before arriving, she and her running mate, that's Governor Tim Walz, campaign in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. Tonight, we'll hear from President Biden and the First Lady, plus former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And later in the week, former Presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton will speak before Harris takes to the stage on Thursday. Joining me now from Chicago is CBS News campaign reporter Shawna Mizelle. She's been following the campaign this entire time. So, Shawna, break down what we can expect from today's events up until the president speaks.
Vlad, good morning. It's great to be with you today. Today is day one of the DNC kicking off in Chicago. And right now there are a slew of events happening. They are state delegation breakfasts. And I just left the Wisconsin delegation breakfast where we saw Majority Leader Chuck Schumer come up and speak about how critical Wisconsin is going to be not only in the presidential election, but for Democrats to maintain the majority in the Senate. But there was also a surprise visit from Harris's running mate, Tim Walz. He talked about how it's been a very busy 11 days since Harris has selected him, and even highlighted some of the stops that they made yesterday on the campaign trail.
All right, Shawna. So the question, of course, is what kind of a speech are we expecting President Biden to deliver this evening? From what we understand, the moments leading up to the president taking to the stage is going to be a reflection, a look back, a memorialization of, as Democrats see it, the successes of the Biden administration. What are you hearing?
Well, we know that it was very contentious, and Biden really took a lot of time in deciding to step down. But since then, he has thrown his support behind Harris. He actually endorsed Harris about 30 minutes after he stepped down in a post on X. So he will definitely be highlighting his accomplishments. But people here are also very thankful for Biden. There was actually somebody just walking around in a shirt that said, "Thank you, Joe." We know that he vied for the presidency for a very long time and has really dedicated his life to service and politics.
All right, Shawna Mizelle for us, reporting from the Windy City. Shawna, thank you very much. And don't forget, CBS News will have coverage of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago throughout the day, plus special programming beginning today at 5 p.m. Eastern. Meanwhile, a new CBS poll shows Vice President Harris has opened up a slim 3-point lead nationally over her Republican counterpart, former President Donald Trump. Our Elections and Survey Executive Director, Anthony Salvanto, has the very latest on that. All right, Anthony, love this time of year for you. Break down what we're seeing for the polls.
How you doing, Vlad? Let me show you those numbers because I want to put this in context for everybody. This is a tight race. This is a close race. That's your takeaway you need to know. Yeah, it's +3 nationally for Harris, but the fact is that while everyone's opinion counts in the nation, it's not the national popular vote that decides the presidency. It's the battleground states, the ones that happen to be closest. And that, our estimate is even. State by state, they're all close. That's what you need to know. So what does that mean going into the convention, Vlad? Let me show you this first and foremost. We got here, back to this even race, where Joe Biden had been trailing, because when Harris became the nominee, we saw a boost in enthusiasm among Democrats. More of them starting in July and heading into right up to now keep saying they're going to vote. What does that tell you? Tells you part of this convention is going to be Democrats trying to keep that enthusiasm going, keep that momentum going, because so much is going to depend on them staying even with Republicans on that turnout, that excitement metric, Vlad.
So, Anthony, let me ask you, one of the things that even Democrats, but especially Republicans, have been wondering is what kind of policies are we expected to learn from Kamala Harris? Because up until this moment, as you know, it's been sort of a honeymoon phase where the base is very, very excited. We got a little bit of a flavor of the kind of policies she might enact should she be elected president. But what are you hearing about that? What people want to hear about her vision for the future?
Well, as always, Vlad, you ask the key question, right? So we've got two, I think, dynamics here. One is, do people know what Kamala Harris stands for. And the fact is, this is not surprising, right? You've got a third of people who say that they don't. Well, there's a lot of space in there for that fight within the fight here to define her and for her to define herself for those folks who fall into that bucket, right? Number one. But number two, since tonight is this kind of passing of the torch from Biden to Harris, you want to look at how different or the same do people think that they are. Well, 2/3 of voters think her views and policies are going to be mostly the same, but not entirely the same as his. That's important because number one, she does better among voters when they think it's mostly, but not entirely. And number two, because remember, because Joe Biden was trailing, so you don't necessarily want to be seen as entirely the same. You want to talk about some of those differences. That's the balance that she's got to strike tonight, and that's how you sort of quantify it, Vlad.
Yeah, if I'm the Harris campaign, Anthony, I'm looking at those numbers and I like what I see because on one hand, and if you're President Biden, if you were worried, if you thought to yourself that if the president thought that he was the one that was going to beat Donald Trump, these numbers actually kind of don't tell that story. The way I read them is when people say she's entirely the same in terms of policies, that means that they think Joe Biden was a successful president and that Kamala Harris will continue with those policies that made him a successful president, right? And then when you look at that 19% that says entirely the same, the 19%, in my mind, it sort of says, okay, there will be some differences that she distinguishes herself, for example, perhaps with Middle East policy and what's going on between Israel and Hamas.
Yeah, because, and I think you break it down right, because there's always going to be a little bit of wish casting when there's a new candidate, right? You think, well, they give them a chance to stand for the things that I want them to stand for. So there's going to be some in that response. And then some of it's going to be pejorative. Some of it's going to be, oh, well, we'll just, dismiss. If you're a Republican, you go, well, she's probably the same as Joe Biden. Some of that is going to be baked in there, too. And that's going to be part of her messaging as well. The other part of this, Vlad, because it speaks to what you're saying, is we've seen this growing gender gap in the polling and more women now voting Harris, more men moving or voting for Trump. And the way it speaks to your point there is that women are starting to give Harris a little more benefit of the doubt on issues, especially on the economy, where when they think it's an important issue, they're a little better in voting for her than they were for Joe Biden. So to your point, it's a little bit of that, where can she be different from Joe Biden? Because certainly on the economy, he wasn't doing very well. So there's a sort of room to grow in there if her campaign works out there, Vlad.
Yeah, I mean, look, the national polling that you're suggesting here, showing that Vice President Harris is polling within the margin of error, or in some instances pulling ahead of former President Trump, essentially says to me, if you liked everything that Biden did, you just were not enthusiastic about his campaign because you had concerns about his age. So that's sort of how I read that. Now, meanwhile, you're showing the former president there. He polls well on some of the issues that Republicans care about, and even some Democrats, specifically immigration and the economy.
We just cannot forget, and so I'm glad you raise it, where Donald Trump does well and what has not changed in this campaign. And these are some of those things. The economy, I mentioned it, but he's still leading on it. Inflation specifically. And it's not just inflation. There's more people who think that if Trump becomes president, that prices will go down. Now, they're not, and they tell us, they're not specifically sure how that would happen, but there's a larger sense of, nostalgia for his economy when he was president that's baked into a lot of these numbers. And so you get that confidence going forward. Not only would he tackle inflation, but they would actually make prices go down. That's something that then you watch the convention, can Harris push back against that idea? Because he's definitely got an advantage on it. And it's been consistently the most, if not one of the most important issues. And yeah, very quickly to mention on the border as well, people thinking that his policies would reduce border crossings. So all of those are advantages for Trump, who is polling, if you compare it to 2020, is polling better than he was polling in 2020. So a lot of that is about what hasn't changed here, Vlad.
Anthony Salvanto with the most interesting conversation I think I will have all day. Thank you, Anthony, as always, my brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks, buddy.